The lights were blinding, and the excitement was palpable as the stars arrived at one of the most awaited events of the year. It was the movie premiere everyone had been talking about for months, and the red carpet stretched for what seemed like miles, lined with cameras, reporters, and flashing lights. People from all walks of life had gathered to see the celebrities, and the air was thick with anticipation. The crowd roared with excitement as one by one, the famous faces appeared. Actors, directors, and influencers stepped onto the red carpet, smiling for the cameras, posing, and waving at their fans. The atmosphere was electric, as the night promised to be filled with unforgettable moments. The elegant music playing in the background added to the grandeur of the event. People were dressed to impress, in stunning gowns and sharp tuxedos, with everyone trying to catch a glimpse of their favorite stars. Among the crowd, there was a young girl, standing off to the side. She wasn't a celebrity, and she wasn't part of the media. She was just another face in the sea of people, but for her, this event meant so much more. The girl, let's call her Lily, had grown up watching Keanu Reeves on screen, admiring him not just for his talent, but for the kindness and humility he exuded in interviews and public appearances. To her, Keanu wasn't just a famous actor. He was an inspiration, a symbol of what it meant to be a good person in a world full of chaos. Lily had never expected to be here, on this glittering red carpet, rubbing elbows with stars. She was just a regular girl from a small town, and this was all a dream come true. But tonight wasn't just about the glitz and glamour for her. It was about something more personal, something she had been carrying for a long time. As she stood there, surrounded by the glitter of cameras and the laughter of the crowd, her mind raced. Keanu was on his way. She had heard the buzz, the whispers from the people around her about his arrival. She could feel her heart beat faster. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She wasn't just going to stand here like everyone else and watch from afar. Tonight, she would finally speak to him. She had a confession to make, something she couldn't ignore any longer. The event continued around her, but for Lily, time slowed. She watched Keanu's team getting ready for his walk down the carpet, and she knew this was her chance. She had to do it now, before the moment slipped away. Everyone else seemed content to watch from a distance, but Lily knew she couldn't just be another face in the crowd. She had to be brave, had to take a step that would change everything. Little did she know, her bold move was about to change the course of the evening, and perhaps her life. The cameras clicked away, capturing every perfect moment, but none of them knew what was about to unfold. As Lily took a deep breath and pushed her way through the crowd, she knew there was no turning back. She had made up her mind. It was time to meet the man who had unknowingly inspired her and share a secret she had carried in her heart for too long. Lily's heart raced as she stood in the midst of the excited crowd, but her eyes were fixed on one person, Keanu Reeves. The lights around her seemed to blur into the background as her focus tightened solely on him. People were gathered everywhere, cheering, waving banners, and taking photos. Celebrities smiled and posed for the cameras, but Lily didn't care about them. She cared about him, the man she had admired for years, not just for his incredible acting, but for the way he always carried himself with kindness and humility. Her thoughts raced back to the countless times she had watched his movies. She remembered how he seemed so different from other stars. While most of them acted like they were above everyone else, Keanu always felt like someone who would sit down and have a real conversation with you. He didn't need to try hard to be kind. It came naturally to him. That was why Lily had admired him for so long. He reminded her of the type of person she always wanted to be, someone who was genuine, caring, and humble. But tonight, there was more on her mind than just admiration. Tonight, she had something important to say, something she had kept hidden for far too long. She couldn't ignore it anymore. The confession she had carried in her heart for years needed to come out. It wasn't something she had ever shared with anyone. Not even her closest friends knew about it. Lily had always been a quiet, reserved person. She kept her feelings to herself, preferring to observe the world rather than be the center of attention. She wasn't the type to take bold steps, but there was something about this night, something about being here, standing just a few feet away from the person who had unknowingly shaped her life, that made her realize she couldn't stay silent. Not this time. She could feel the energy of the crowd around her, but it felt like they were all a million miles away. The noise from the cameras and chatter from the reporters faded into the background. It was just her and the man she had long admired. Her hands felt clammy, and her breath was shallow as she thought about what she was about to do. She couldn't believe she was even considering it, but the thought of leaving without saying anything was unbearable. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to do it. Keanu was just a few feet away now, surrounded by his team, getting ready to step onto the red carpet. His signature calm and collected aura made him seem untouchable, like someone who existed in a different world altogether. But Lily wasn't going to let that stop her. This wasn't about fame, or the red carpet, or even the crowds. This was about something deeper, something she had carried with her for too long. With a final deep breath, she made up her mind. She would run to him. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that if she didn't act now, she would regret it forever. Lily took one last glance at the stars around her, and with newfound determination, made her way through the crowd. She didn't look back. There was no turning back now. Lily's legs felt like they were moving on their own as she pushed her way through the crowd. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her palms were sweaty. She could hear the whispers from the people around her, wondering what this girl was doing. Some tried to get a glimpse of her face, curious to know who she was. But Lily didn't care about that right now. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, locked on the man she had admired for years. The man who had no idea she existed. She couldn't believe she was doing this. Every step she took felt like it was pulling her into the unknown. The red carpet event was happening all around her, but she was no longer a part of it. She was in her own world now, a world where nothing mattered except reaching Keanu. She had only one chance, and she knew it. The closer she got to him, the more real it all became. Lily stopped for a moment, right before she reached the security barrier. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. She had spent hours wondering if she was doing the right thing. What if he didn't understand? What if she made a fool of herself in front of all these people? The doubts flooded her mind, threatening to stop her in her tracks. But then, she thought about all the years she had spent admiring Keanu. It wasn't just because he was a famous actor. It was because of his kindness, his compassion, his down-to-earth attitude. He had inspired her more than anyone else. In that moment, all the doubts disappeared. She had to do this. She had to tell him what she had been holding inside for so long. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about connecting with someone who had unknowingly changed her life. Lily stepped forward again, her feet moving without hesitation. She could hear the noise of the event fading, and all she could think about was reaching Keanu. The barriers and security guards were no longer obstacles to her. It was like everything around her had slowed down. It was just her and the man who had always felt like a far-off dream. As she approached, she could see him more clearly now. His calm presence was undeniable. Keanu stood tall, with an air of quiet confidence. He was talking with his team, seemingly unaware of the girl approaching him. Lily's heart raced, and she fought the urge to stop and turn back. But she didn't. She had come this far. She wouldn't turn away now. The closer she got, the more the world around her seemed to blur. She was close enough now to reach out and touch him, and that thought made her heart beat even faster. She could feel her breath quicken. The noise from the cameras, the flashes, the crowd, all of it seemed so distant now. The only thing that mattered was the moment she had been building up to for so long. And then, as if it was meant to be, Keanu turned in her direction. His eyes met hers, and for a brief second, everything around them seemed to vanish. He saw her. He noticed her. Lily stopped in her tracks, standing just a few feet away from the person who had meant so much to her. She could hardly believe this was happening, but she didn't hesitate. This was her moment, and she was ready to take it. With a shaky breath, she opened her mouth and spoke, knowing that this was the moment that would change everything. Lily stood still, just a few feet away from Keanu. Her heart raced faster than ever, and every sound around her felt muffled, like she was in a bubble. The flashes from the cameras, the voices of the reporters, the excited chatter from the crowd, all of it faded into the background. It was as if time had slowed down. She could only focus on Keanu, who was now staring back at her with a look of quiet surprise. For a brief moment, she was frozen. She had come so far, worked up the courage to approach him. But now that she was here, the words she had planned to say felt lost. Her breath caught in her throat as she wondered if she should turn around and walk away. What if he didn't want to talk to her? What if her confession wasn't what he expected? Doubts crept into her mind, but she fought them back. Keanu's eyes softened as he took in the sight of the nervous girl standing before him. There was something in her expression, something that told him she wasn't here for fame or attention. She wasn't just another fan looking for a photo or an autograph. She had something important to say, and for some reason, he felt drawn to her. He slowly raised his hand, signaling to the security team that had been keeping the crowd in check. For a moment, the guards hesitated, unsure of what to do, but Keanu's calm demeanor reassured them. He gave a small nod, and they stood back, allowing Lily to approach without any interference. The crowd around them seemed to hold its breath, unsure of what was happening. Was this part of the event? Were they witnessing something unexpected? The reporters, who had been snapping photos of the celebrities just moments before, now turned their attention to the unusual scene unfolding before them. But none of that mattered to Lily. It wasn't about them. It wasn't about the event. It was about her and Keanu, standing there in a brief moment of stillness. Lily's legs felt like they were made of stone, but she slowly took a step forward. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let this chance slip away. Not after everything she had been through to get here. She took another step, and then another, until she was standing just a few feet away from him. The crowd was still buzzing around them, but it felt like the world had faded away. She could only see him now, Keanu, standing in front of her, waiting for her to speak. Keanu. Lily's voice cracked as she said his name. It felt surreal, saying his name out loud, knowing that he was standing there, right in front of her. She swallowed hard, gathering the strength to continue. Keanu's expression softened, and he tilted his head slightly, as if waiting for her to continue. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't acting impatient. He just stood there, allowing her the space to say what she needed to say. It was as if he understood that this moment meant more to her than anything else. For a brief second, Lily's nerves settled. The way Keanu was looking at her, with kindness and patience, gave her the courage to speak. She knew she had one shot at this, and she couldn't waste it. This was the moment to share her truth, no matter how nervous or uncertain she felt. She inhaled deeply and gathered her thoughts. She wasn't sure what she expected from him, but one thing was certain. She had made the right decision. This was her time to tell him how much his presence had impacted her life. She just had to find the right words. The moment hung in the air, thick with tension and anticipation. Lily's heart was hammering in her chest, but she was no longer afraid. Keanu was right there, waiting for her. His gaze was calm and understanding, like he could see right through her nervousness. It was as if, for a brief moment, everything around them didn't matter. There was just the two of them, in the middle of the red carpet, amidst the chaos of the event. Lily opened her mouth, but her voice caught in her throat. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times, but now that she was finally face to face with the man who had unknowingly inspired her, the words felt tangled up inside her. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. She didn't want to waste this chance. She needed to speak, to tell him what had been weighing on her heart for so long. Keanu noticed her hesitation. His expression softened, and without saying a word, he took a small step closer. It was a simple gesture, but it made Lily feel like she wasn't alone. It was as if he was saying, "Take your time. I'm here." "Thank you," Lily whispered, her voice shaky. She wasn't sure if he could hear her, but she said it anyway. She was grateful for this moment, grateful for the chance to speak to him, even if she was still unsure of how to begin. Keanu smiled gently. There was no hint of impatience, no rush to move on to the next celebrity or fan. He was just there, present, waiting for her to speak. Lily couldn't help but feel a deep sense of warmth. It was exactly what she had imagined. Keanu was exactly the person she had hoped he would be, kind, patient, and completely down to earth. Lily took a deep breath and finally found the courage to speak. "I've been watching you for years. Not just in movies, but in interviews and everything you do. I don't know if you realize this, but you've helped me through some tough times." Her words came out in a rush, but they felt right. The weight that had been on her shoulders for so long seemed to lift just a little with each sentence. Keanu didn't interrupt her. He just listened, his eyes never leaving hers. His expression was still kind, but there was something more in his gaze now. A quiet understanding that made Lily feel seen in a way she had never felt before. "I know it sounds silly," she continued, "but watching you, hearing the way you talk about kindness, about living authentically, it gave me hope when I didn't have any left. I've never told anyone this, but I think I needed you to know that. You've meant more to me than you'll ever know." Keanu's face softened even more, and he looked down for a brief moment, as if taking in what she had just said. Lily waited, holding her breath, wondering what he would say. When he looked back up at her, there was a quiet sincerity in his eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. The words were gentle but full of meaning, as if he truly understood the depth of her feelings. "I'm glad my work has been able to help you in some way. That's all any of us can hope for." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected such a response, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. Keanu wasn't just a celebrity to her anymore. In that moment, he was a person who cared, a person who understood the power of kindness, even in the simplest moments, and somehow it made everything feel okay. The crowd around them seemed to fade into the background again, leaving only the two of them standing there. This brief encounter, this quiet exchange, was enough to make Lily feel like she wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just another fan lost in the crowd. Keanu had seen her, and for the first time in a long time, she felt seen and heard. Lily's heart still pounded in her chest, but this time it was different. The fear she had felt earlier began to fade, replaced by something else, something calmer, like a weight being slowly lifted off her shoulders. Keanu's words, simple yet kind, had given her the strength she needed to keep going. He had listened, and in doing so, he had made her feel like she mattered. But now, she knew it was time for the most important part. The confession she had been holding inside for so long, the one she hadn't even dared to speak aloud until now. It wasn't easy. It never had been. But she knew it had to be said, for her own peace of mind, and for the chance to let Keanu truly understand why he meant so much to her. Lily took another deep breath, gathering her thoughts before speaking again. This time, her voice was steadier, her nerves still present but not overwhelming. She looked up at Keanu, who was still standing in front of her, patient and waiting. His kind eyes never wavered from hers, offering her silent encouragement. Lily began, then paused. The words felt heavier now, more significant than anything she had said before. "I've never really told anyone about this, not even my closest friends, but I think it's time." Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. He didn't rush her, but gave her the space to continue at her own pace. Lily swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her emotions rising to the surface. "When I was younger," she began, her voice trembling just slightly, "I went through some really tough times. Times when I felt lost, and like I didn't belong anywhere. I struggled with my own sense of worth. I couldn't find anything that made me feel like I had a purpose, like I mattered." She paused for a moment, looking down at her feet, suddenly feeling vulnerable. It wasn't easy to admit these things, but Keanu's quiet presence made her feel safe enough to continue. I don't know how or when it happened, but one day I saw an interview with you. You were talking about kindness, about how important it is to be kind not just to others, but to ourselves. And for the first time in my life, I felt like someone understood, like you were speaking directly to me. It was as if you were telling me that I wasn't alone. Her voice grew softer, the weight of the confession almost too much to bear. But Keanu's warm gaze never left her face, urging her to keep going. That interview was a turning point for me, she continued. It made me realize that maybe I didn't have to have everything figured out. That maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to be kind to myself. I could start to believe that I was worthy of good things, just like anyone else. Lily took a slow breath, feeling the emotions well up inside her. She had never said this out loud before, and it felt like a piece of her soul was finally being released. I guess what I'm trying to say is, your words changed my life. They gave me hope when I didn't have any left. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Keanu stood there in silence for a few moments, his expression unreadable. Lily held her breath, her heart in her throat. She wasn't sure what he would say, but she needed him to know. She needed him to understand how much his kindness had meant to her. Finally, Keanu spoke, his voice soft, but full of sincerity. I'm honored to have had that impact on you, he said. It means more than you can imagine to know that my words could help someone find their way. You're not alone, and I'm so glad you found that hope. Lily felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of relief. For the first time in so long, she felt like she had shared a part of herself that had been hidden away for too long. Keanu's words were simple, but they felt like the most comforting thing she had ever heard. The red carpet event, the noise, and the flashing cameras all seemed so distant now. In this moment, it was just her and Keanu, two people connected by the power of words and kindness. And for Lily, it was enough. The silence that followed Lily's confession seemed to stretch on forever, but it was a comforting silence. Keanu stood there, his eyes locked on hers, his face soft with understanding. Lily's heart continued to race, but now it was mixed with a sense of relief. She had finally shared her deepest feelings, something she had kept inside for so long, and Keanu had listened without judgment. But the next moment, Keanu did something Lily had never expected. Without a word, he turned slightly toward the event organizers and gave them a small but firm nod. Lily wasn't sure what was happening at first, but then she noticed something strange. He was signaling for them to stop. The sounds of the cameras clicking and the reporters shouting at the celebrities on the carpet began to die down. The excitement in the air shifted. It was as though everything had come to a sudden, unexpected halt. Lily's confusion grew. She looked around, unsure of what was happening. Was something wrong? Had she done something to upset the flow of the event? She didn't understand why Keanu would stop everything for her. But then Keanu turned back toward her, his gaze never leaving her face. It's okay, he said quietly, his voice calm and reassuring. I'm sorry, but I need to stop this event for a moment. What you shared with me is important, and I want to give it the attention it deserves. Lily stood frozen, stunned by what he had just said. The weight of his words hung in the air like a rare gift. Here she was, a regular girl in the middle of a red carpet event, and Keanu Reeves, one of the biggest stars in the world, was asking the organizers to halt everything just for her. It felt unreal. The security team and the event staff exchanged surprised looks, but they quickly complied. The reporters who had been snapping photos moments earlier now stood in silence, unsure of what to do. They had never witnessed anything like this. Everyone was watching, but no one made a sound. Lily felt like the entire world had shifted. She had never imagined that someone like Keanu would not only listen to her, but also take her words so seriously. He wasn't just treating her like another fan. He was treating her like her feelings mattered, like she was worth his time and attention. "I just want to make sure you know how much it means to me that you shared that with me," Keanu said, his voice still soft but steady. "What you said is important, and it's not something that should be brushed aside for the sake of an event." Lily blinked, trying to process what was happening. Her emotions were all over the place, a mix of disbelief, joy, and deep gratitude. She had never imagined this moment in her wildest dreams. Keanu was speaking to her like she was an equal, like her words truly mattered. As the crowd stood silently, waiting for some kind of direction, Lily felt a wave of calm wash over her. She had stepped into this moment with nothing but the courage to speak her truth, and now, in the midst of the chaos, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Keanu gave her a small, reassuring smile, his eyes warm. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up," he said. "Your words will stay with me, and I hope they help you find the peace you've been looking for." Lily felt a tear slip down her cheek, but it wasn't one of sadness. It was a tear of gratitude. She had never felt more understood in her life. Keanu hadn't just stopped the event. He had given her something even more precious: his time, his attention, and the recognition that her words mattered. It was a gift she would never forget. As the minutes passed, the event organizers slowly began to return to their usual rhythm, though it was clear the red carpet had been temporarily paused for something unexpected. The flashes of cameras began again, but this time, they weren't aimed at the celebrities. They were on Keanu and Lily, who were standing in a quiet space apart from the usual glamour of the evening. Lily's heart was still racing, but it wasn't out of nervousness anymore. It was out of sheer amazement at what had just happened. She had confessed something deeply personal to Keanu Reeves, a man she had admired from afar for years, and not only had he listened, he had stopped the whole event just to give her the time and space to speak. The kindness he had shown her felt like a dream, one she had never expected to come true. As the event continued around them, Lily found herself standing there, a little in awe of the experience. People had begun whispering among themselves, trying to understand what had just occurred. They knew something special had happened, but no one knew the details. The reporters, who were usually so focused on capturing every image of the stars, were now quietly observing the exchange between Keanu and Lily. It was clear that something extraordinary had just taken place, something that went beyond the usual headlines. Keanu, however, seemed unfazed by the attention. He stood there, his demeanor calm, as though this small act of kindness was just part of who he was. He had given Lily what she needed, not just his attention, but his empathy. He had shown her that even in the fast-paced world of fame and fortune, there was room for kindness and understanding. Lily felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. The doubts and insecurities that had plagued her for so long seemed to fade into the background. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, sharing something vulnerable, and in return, Keanu had given her the most incredible gift. He had made her feel seen. He had shown her that her words mattered, that her feelings were worth listening to. As the crowd around them began to disperse and the event resumed its usual pace, Keanu turned to Lily and smiled gently. "You know, you're not alone in feeling that way," he said quietly, his voice warm. "We all go through tough times, but what matters is that we keep going, that we find the strength to keep being kind to ourselves, even when it's hard." Lily nodded, her eyes brimming with gratitude. His words resonated deeply with her. She had always admired Keanu for his on-screen presence, but now, in this moment, she admired him even more for the way he treated others. Like real people, not just stars. He hadn't just been kind in the way he acted in front of cameras. He had been kind in the way he genuinely listened and responded, as if every word she said was important. "Thank you," Lily said softly, her voice full of emotion. "You've changed my life in ways you can't even imagine." Keanu smiled again, his eyes twinkling with sincerity. "I'm just glad I could help. And remember, it's okay to reach out for support when you need it." Lily walked away from that encounter feeling lighter than she had in years. The world around her may have returned to its usual rhythm, but she knew that this moment, this unexpected exchange, would stay with her forever. Keanu had reminded her of something important, that kindness, even in the smallest gestures, can change lives. And for Lily, that realization was a gift she would carry with her always. As Lily walked away from Keanu, she couldn't help but feel as though she was walking on air. The red carpet, the crowd, the flashing lights. Everything that had once seemed so important now felt distant, almost unimportant. What mattered now was the connection she had just made with him, a connection that had completely changed her view of herself and the world around her. The chaos of the event continued, but Lily felt like she was in a different world. She had shared her deepest feelings, and Keanu had not only listened, but had also given her something far more valuable, his time and his understanding. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about kindness and the impact a single conversation could have on a person's life. Lily had always admired Keanu for his kindness, but now she saw him as more than just a star. She saw him as someone who used his position to make the world a better place, even in small ways. It was a lesson she would carry with her forever. That kindness could be found in the most unexpected places, and sometimes all it took was one moment to change everything. As she stood off to the side, taking in the sights of the red carpet one last time, Lily realized that the impact of that brief encounter would last much longer than the event itself. It wasn't just the words Keanu had shared with her. It was the way he had made her feel heard and understood. That sense of being seen, of being valued, was something she had never experienced before in such a profound way. The days following the event passed by in a blur, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling of peace that had settled within her. She had found the strength to speak her truth, and in return, she had received something so much more than she had expected. Keanu had given her hope when she needed it most, reminding her that it was okay to be vulnerable, to share her struggles, and to seek connection with others. She thought about how the world often felt fast-paced and overwhelming, with people rushing through their lives without ever really stopping to listen to one another. But Keanu had done just that. He had stopped, listened, and responded with kindness. It made her realize that, in a world full of noise, there was still room for genuine connection. The impact of that moment wasn't just about how Keanu had responded to her. It was about how he had made her feel in the process. He had shown her that even in the hustle and bustle of the world, small acts of kindness could still make a difference. And that realization gave her a new sense of purpose. Lily knew she would never forget that day. It wasn't just the day she met Keanu Reeves. It was the day she learned the true power of kindness. The lesson she had learned would stay with her for the rest of her life, shaping the way she interacted with the world and with others. As she walked away from the event, Lily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She had found hope in the most unlikely of places, and she knew she would carry that hope with her, wherever life took her next. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest moments can have the greatest impact, and that kindness, in all its forms, could change everything.